Okay, I started the recording.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. So let me just start off by thanking you guys for making the time to come today to our Science of Hope training. And I'll just briefly introduce you, Chris, from what all that I have to say. You'll do a much better job. But this is Chris Glover. She comes to us from LGH with a unique opportunity, I feel. And so she's gonna do some talking. I don't know if you had time to peruse the handouts that I had included in the invitation, but I did, and they look pretty interesting and pretty cool. So I'm excited to hear what she's gonna share with us today.
Okay, no pressure.
Not
All right.
at all.
Going to share my screen, helps me stay on task. So currently I coordinate a project called Joining Forces for Children, which provides specialized education and support to kiddos of all ages who are impacted by a loved one's substance use. And so it's in the context of that project or that program that we really started to dig into and learn about hope theory and how to apply it. So some of the basics are the basics, but then I've done what I can to kind of tailor it more to the work that I believe you do every day, and the folks that you work with, which are not children impacted by addiction. So all that to say, I don't conduct this research myself, just a lifelong learner who's taken a deep dive and geeked out a little bit, and sharing what I have learned so far with you. So I welcome very much at any point in time your questions, your thoughts. There may quite possibly be some things that I cannot answer for you today, but I am happy to go back and take another deep dive and find those answers, or phone a friend and get you the information that you need if we don't have it today. All right. I think those cover pretty much the housekeeping things, so we will jump right in. So our agenda for today is that we're really gonna define hope, and then I'm gonna share with you that it can be measured and how you can do that if that's something that you're interested in doing for yourself and or for the folks that you work with. And then we're gonna offer some, I hope, really super easy practical strategies for you to incorporate to nurture hope in yourself, in the folks that you work with, in loved ones, wherever you might feel it can be applied, I should say. All right. So what on earth is hope? Oh, we're going to get a visit from my executive assistant. So when you hear this word hope, and we're a small enough group that I think we can unmute ourselves, or you're welcome to certainly, use the chat. The chat is always a handy tool. What comes to your mind when you hear that word? Positive expectation for the future. Okay, Bruce did some studying, I guess. He came prepared for the test. Absolutely. So would you say that that is an emotion or a way of thinking? Is hope an emotion or is it a way of thinking?
I would say a way of thinking.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think it's a feeling too,
So
because it
Bruce,
makes you feel good about, if you're if you think good things are going to happen, you're going to feel more positive, have more, be happy and excited and looking forward to things.
right on. Thanks for sharing, Bruce. So, according to the researchers that I've been reading their work, they believe that it is a way of thinking. And that's important because that means we can teach it and people can learn it, which is a pretty groovy thing. And so the main researcher that I've been following is a gentleman by the name of Chan Hellman, and he works at the University of Oklahoma. And he is built off of some early positive psychology research by a gentleman named Rick Snyder. And so he's building off of Snyder's definition of hope and sharing his, which is that hope is the belief that your future can be better than today and that you actually have a role to play in making it better. Okay. So it's an action oriented words. It's action oriented. We'll leave it at that. And so these researchers have really identified three main components of hope. Okay, so the whole idea is that future orientation, that positive expectation for the future that Bruce was also talking about, is that we have this desired goal, this thing that we want to achieve, something that's really important to us. Okay, not necessarily something that we as service providers think that the people that we work with need or want, but really them identifying themselves, what they want, what's important to them. And so then agency and pathways come into play to help us get to that desired goal. So agency, another word for it is willpower, right? This mental energy that we have to work towards the goal. That's really where the motivational piece, we're feeling motivated, we're feeling excited to work towards this thing that we want. And then the pathways are the different strategies, the different routes we can take to help us get to that goal. And we'll dig into all of these components a little bit more in the next few minutes. But before we do that, I just want to clarify that in our everyday language, we use the word hope a whole awful lot, but we don't use it in the context of this hope theory. So if we want to apply the science, one really sort of kind of what I like to call the low-hanging fruit way to do that is to start to shift our language. And so really knowing that hope is about taking action, okay? And when we don't have a way to get there or a strategy to implement to control the outcome, it's just a wish. So if I am telling you, hope you have a good weekend, there isn't really an action that I can take, right, to impact your weekend. So really, I am wishing you a good weekend. Okay, so subtle difference, but I think you'll agree that, you know, words have a lot of power. And so when we start to shift some of those things, it can just help to kind of help us with our mental set, kind of think about how we apply this science. So, you know, I have made some effort to be more intentional in my language, and I've gotten a couple of kind of weird, like, huh, what is she talking about? But then it's an opportunity for me to share this science with folks. And, you know, the cool thing about hope is that building hope creates more hope. So it's just this cool kind of domino kind of effect, which I really like. The other super groovy thing about hope is that it really changes the question from what happened to you to what is going well for you, right? It's really building off of all these strengths and assets that we already have, these successes that we've already accomplished, and building off of those. So it's another really cool sort of shift in context. And so to really drive this whole idea of goals, pathways, and agency home, I'm going to offer you this analogy of my minivan. And so if we think about goals as the destination of our journey, whether we are taking a short trip across town or we're taking a longer journey across country, so goals can be either short or long term, right? They can take a really long time, or they can be something that happens today, even. So our pathways are kind of like our map. And this is, of course, an outdated skill, but nonetheless, it works for the analogy. That, you know, the route that we pick may not always be the most direct route to our destination. And, you know, if we don't have our GPS on, we may not know about some of those traffic jams and road work happening along the way. And so we may need to adjust our route in the middle of our journey. Okay. Sometimes we don't even have a map. And so we have to learn sort of how to find the map, right? How to identify the different routes that we can take to get there, and learning to kind of decipher which route is going to be the most direct route. And the thing that I like about this is like that's a lot like life, right? You get up and you set out to go about your day in a certain kind of a way, and something like, you know, happened to me this morning. You drop your phone in the toilet, and it just kind of changes the route that you're going to take for the day. So I think it's a really good sort of visual and sort of just framework to think about pathways and how unexpected things happen in life. And that sometimes, you know, when we encounter those hiccups, those speed bumps, we need to rely on other people to really just kind of help us work through some of those things and adjust our route. And the agency in this minivan analogy is really like the motor of our engine. It is the thing that helps us navigate our pathways. It requires us to stay tuned and to replenish when we're low on fuel. And of course, you know, that might mean self-care, that might mean nutrition. Some of the research shows that our mental energy is directly connected to the levels of glucose that we have in our system every day, which means it's going to be limited every day, right? But still, having that excitement, having that fuel to continue to pursue that goal is important. We must replenish that. And so I really like this minivan analogy because in the reality of everyday life, right, there are those stressors that we encounter, are the responsibilities that we have, the competing goals that come up, children, pets, partners, our jobs, any mental health challenges that we have, any adverse childhood experiences we're carrying with us, any substance use concerns we're taking with us, whatever our burdens are, they never totally leave our van. Okay. But people with high hope learn to put all of those burdens up in the luggage rack of their van. And if their van doesn't have a luggage rack, then they have to learn to put it in the way back. It's gotta go way back there. Because if we ride with these burdens up in our passenger seat, they distract us and they keep us in worry and regret. We perseverate on things. But if we're able to put those burdens up in the luggage rack or in the way back, then we really are able to stay looking forward, to be future focused, and to really think about what is possible. Thoughts about my minivan analogy? Okay, I can't see everybody, but I can see Dawn giving me a thumbs up. Couple of nods. All right. It's a quiet crowd. All right, no pressure. All right, we'll get you talking. Challenge accepted, folks. Challenge accepted. Okay, point of clarification. Hope is not optimism. Okay, you are absolutely optimistic if you think that your future will be better than your past. But you're hopeful if you also think that you have to take action, that you have a role in making it so. Okay, optimism, right? We all know optimists, they just have this general expectancy that their goals will be achieved, right? They see things like, oh, it's going to work out, it's going to be great. But they don't necessarily have those pathways identified to get to their goal. They don't know those action steps to take. And so the expectation of that positive outcome The expectation of that positive outcome is really what they see as the primary driver of their goal. But hope requires both that agency, that excitement, that motivation, that mental energy, that willpower, and those pathways, those different strategies to take to get there. Hope tends to increase optimism, but optimism does not necessarily increase hope. And optimism can become false hope when there is no pathway to a goal. Okay. Hope is a pretty powerful thing. It impacts all kinds of things, all the things. And so when we kind of decipher down what the research has identified, it impacts a lot of facets of our lives, right? And so I think most applicable maybe to this group today is that higher hope people are better able to manage stress. They have more social competence. They adhere to medication regimens. They have better physical health. They have better overall life satisfaction. They report fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression, all those kinds of things, right? So lots of the things that we want for the folks that we work with can directly be related to hope. Important to note that there is no real discernible difference between genders or race and ethnicity, though minority groups, people of color, have been shown to produce higher average hope scores and higher levels of agency thinking, which I just think is kind of fascinating. Another way to look at this is to really think about those social emotional skills. And so in the substance use recovery world, we refer to these as part of recovery capital. Is that a phrase that y'all use in the mental health space? Recovery capital? I'm seeing a head shaking no. Okay, so we refer to recovery capital as like all the things that somebody needs to have available to them to find and maintain their recovery. Okay, so that includes like some of these skills that we're going to talk about that we intentionally build through hope, but it also includes like our basic needs, right? Like we need shelter, we need food, we need clothing, all that stuff. Recovery happening in the context of relationships and healthy relationships. So all of those different kinds of things are what we in the drug and alcohol world call recovery capital. And I would expect that on some level, even though you're not using that phrase, you know that all of those components are beneficial for someone's recovery, right? I'm seeing some nodding. Okay, excellent, excellent. Isn't it amazing how vocabulary is different from one field to the next, but we all are kind of doing the same thing? It's fantastic. So these social emotional skills, right, that we know are beneficial to recovery, and all of these skills in the middle of this Venn diagram are all things that also contribute or can help build hope, right? So coping skills, resilience, self-efficacy, being flexible thinkers, having emotional literacy, right? Understanding those cues, learning healthy, positive, adaptive skills, self-regulation, hello, and of course, all the things that we've been talking about in terms of agency thinking, pathway thinking, being able to solve those problems when you drop your phone in the toilet, and good goal setting. So all of these things kind of intertwine, right? These social emotional skills, right, that we know improve our overall sort of ability to engage and interact and maintain healthy relationships with all these other skills that we know help to nurture hope. And so the cool thing about hope theory, if you look to the far right of this diagram, is that it's not dependent on like any of these characteristics. It's not dependent on your age, your income, your intelligence, your socioeconomic status, your gender, or your family background. So the cool thing about hope is that no matter where you are in life or in geography, hope is something that is accessible for you. And when we think about hope and recovery from mental illness, I think it's similar in recovery from substance use disorder, and that for many folks, it is not only the thing that initiates their recovery process, but it is also the thing that sustains it. And so we see in the literature that individuals in recovery from mental illness that have higher hope tend to have more insight about their illness, and they tend to use more positive adaptive coping strategies. So, they're more successful in their recovery, really is how I interpret that. So it is, something I think that we know, but like, how do we actually apply it, right? Before we get to how do we actually apply it, we're going to take a slight detour and talk about the fact that it can be measured. So it is an incredibly dynamic process and can fluctuate significantly over time. So even in the course of an hour or a day, your hope can fluctuate. How you're feeling about that future can fluctuate. And so with young people, we really see this fluctuate a great deal. It fluctuates a little bit less with adults, and so it is recommended to measure an adult's hope score once a year, unless they're having, something significant happen in their life. I would say for population of folks who are, experiencing mental illness or in recovery from mental illness or working towards recovery, that it certainly could be something to measure more frequently. With the young folks that we work with, it's really helpful for many of them to have that visual cue as another sort of way to see and celebrate the success that they're having. So in your handouts, I did include the adult hope scale. The thing that you'll notice about it is that it's going to measure both your agency thinking and your pathways thinking. And that's helpful because then you know what kind of support, where to support someone depending upon which score may be higher or lower. So you get your agency score, your pathways score, and then you get an overall hope score. So the scale itself is these 8 questions, and then there's a Likert scale, so it's like not at all to all the time, right? About how you rate these statements for yourself, and it's self-reported, so folks are doing that on their own. And then it's a way to start a conversation. It's a way to share a little bit of the science and the power of hope. I don't know if folks are familiar with motivational interviewing, but that is, we kind of have that conversation with young folks in sort of a motivational interviewing style conversation, which is helpful. Okay, so the other thing to know about hope in terms of measuring it and in terms of being able to nurture it over time is that it happens on a continuum. And so when people experience repeated failed attempts to achieve their goal, they're going to move through this continuum. First, they're going to experience rage. And I think we can probably all think of a participant that we've worked with, or excuse me, you guys use the word consumer, over, our professional careers where somebody's just been really angry, right? And so in the context of hope, they may have experienced repeated failed attempts to achieve their goal. And yeah, I might get a little angry about that for sure. When I continue to experience those failed attempts and I'm not able to adjust my goal and none of the pathways that I've identified are available to me, then I move into feelings of despair. And so the barriers to attaining my goal are just feeling really insurmountable at this point. And I question the meaning and the value of my effort at this point in this space of despair. And I still direct mental energy towards my goal. I still feel a little bit of motivation to try and work towards it. So I'm not yet hopeless, but I'm not able to identify any pathways that might work, and I'm not ready or able to adjust my goal. So folks who are in this despair phase feel discouraged, they feel numb, they're in despair. And then with more sort of repeated failed attempts, folks will move into apathy. And you may also be able to think of folks you've worked with who are in this phase as well. So they see their goal as unattainable, and they're not anymore expending any mental energy towards this goal, and they don't have any pathways identified. They're just apathetic, so they have a total loss of motivation. So the cool thing is that you know, we can move folks back up the continuum. It doesn't always happen quickly or easily, but it can happen. And so really starting with, again, that desirable goal, that thing that they want. And it might just be, you know, for today I want to take a shower. It might be as simple as that. Today I want to put clean clothes on. It might really be that simple. It might be something more complex, but that's still a success that we can celebrate. And that's still a way to start to, over time, you know, really work towards. You set that goal, you did the steps. I'm super proud of you, right? Let's celebrate it in whatever kind of a way we need to. Sometimes you need to make like a ridiculously big deal about these small things at first, and you feel kind of ridiculous doing it, right? But you're starting to build that confidence in the person that they can do the things that they want to work towards and that they can make it happen. So it is a little bit like you know, working with little kids and just you know, just really kind of going crazy. All right, I got a smile there. We're making progress. Sometimes it means, you know, working with folks to clarify their goals, just to ask some of those curious questions to really understand what it is that they're trying to work for. Walking with them through identifying pathways and the things that may come up that get in the way of those pathways being the right direct route, and then of course all those celebrations along the way. So all of that, creating those future memories of success is a phrase that Dr. Hellman uses, which I think is kind of neat, because you really are helping folks to work towards a future success that becomes a memory, right? It's all kind of connected. So what does this actually look like with folks that we work with? Okay, so a lot of this can be about goal setting. And again, it needs to be desirable to the person that you're working with. It needs to be specific. So the example that I use a lot of times with kids is like, they say, I want to get good grades. That's fantastic. But what does that actually mean? How do we know that you've been successful, right? So it's more about like, I'm going to commit to studying for 1 hour every night this week to be ready for that test on Friday. So it's getting a little bit more specific, and really kind of being able to be in agreement about how are we going to know when we've accomplished this. The other thing that kind of connects to that is that sometimes it needs to be incremental, right? So we've got this example of, I'm going to study 1 hour every night this week. So I can celebrate every single one of those steps, every single one of those increments. And it's something that needs to be prioritized by the person, right? So again, this is the part where as professionals, we need to kind of set our stuff aside sometimes, right? And really just take things at the pace of the person that we're working with. It can be difficult for some participants, right? We have a lot of young folks who want to be NBA stars and NFL stars. And sometimes you just need to re-goal, but sometimes you also need to get a little bit down the process, down the lane a little bit before they are ready for that re-goaling. And re-goaling is really like, I'm ready to kind of set that goal aside or adjust it in some way that makes it more attainable, or I have this new thing that I want to do that is super desirable to me, and I'm going to make it a priority. Lower hope individuals will just kind of go after whatever goal first comes to mind. And that's okay. Like as you first start to work with folks, if that's where they are, that's where they are. That's fantastic. Over time, you know, you can work with them to prioritize goals, and get them to be more specific. If they're not in a place to really have that conversation yet, that's a-okay. But we work towards that over time. And so a note about goal setting. People with higher hope tend to set approach goals that they have to like really kind of push a little bit for, that are really focused on a positive outcome, that they're working to do better than somebody else, something that improves their knowledge, their skills, their learning. So this might be, as opposed to folks who set avoidance goals who are trying to avoid judgment, appearing inferior, or misunderstandings or failure. So this might be the subtle difference between I want to avoid going back to the hospital and I want to kind of maintain my recovery, right? Like subtle things, but really how you're approaching it can be quite different. So if we have folks who we want to work with on their pathways thinking, okay, we're going to work on identifying the best pathways. And I really like the HOPE worksheet. The HOPE, it has a plus sign worksheet in the handouts, because this really has folks kind of walk through a process in a very sort of sequential way, to identify what these pathways are and to help them think about which one is going to be most likely to get you to your goal. It is worth noting that blocked pathways are not necessarily due to a lack of talent. Sometimes the way that our systems and services are designed, unintentionally, or some might argue intentionally, block people. And it doesn't have anything to do with the skills and abilities that they have. So we just need to find another pathway. Sometimes that's difficult. But that's really the message that you want to be sharing with folks that you're working with. Okay, so if you and I can't figure out what this next pathway is, who else can we involve in this to help us figure out what another pathway might be? Right, learning who those folks are that you can call in for some backup. In terms of folks who kind of need to work on that agency, right, that motivation, that mental energy, we focus on things like positive self-talk. I know that I can do this, and you know that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort for folks, but it really helps to build that confidence. And when I have that confidence, then I'm more likely to you know, think that I can do it, to believe in myself, to keep trying. Building off of positive stories, either of other people or in my own past, my memories of success. So if there was something that I achieved that was significant to me, no matter what it was, we're going to build off of that, right? If you did thing A, then you can do thing B. And what are the strengths that you have that can be used, right? You may be able to, if you've been working with the person for a while, identify what those things are, or they might identify them. And in the context of, you know, people with mental illness, we have to be aware of the role that internalized stigma plays, right? So all those inner dialogues and those experiences that folks have, just making it a little bit more difficult for them to really find that motivation sometimes. In terms of folks who have experienced trauma at some point in their lives, it's important to know that you're not going to make as much headway as you might until they really get good at practicing their self-regulation skills. Until they master those, they're kind of not going to be able to really have super high hope. Of course, we want to do, until our ears bleed, active listening, practicing gratitude, good science about the practice of gratitude and its impact, practicing mindfulness, spending time in nature, spending time without technology, all the things, right, that we would think of when we work with people who've experienced trauma, and then creating their hope network. So who are the people in your life that have high hope? What are the stories in your family, in your community, in your neighborhood that help to nurture that hope? Who are the professionals that have high hope, that are part of your hope network when you need to phone a friend, and helping them to kind of know who those folks are, when and how to connect with them.
Chris, I don't know what happened, but I think your mic cut out.
We can't hear you if you can hear us.
Can someone put up a sign?
Oh, did my thing go off? Okay. What was the
Yeah.
last thing you heard me say?
Oh gosh, I think we haven't heard anything since humor.
Oh, okay. All right. All
Wrong?
right.
Okay.
That's okay. I didn't get very far then.
Sorry, we were trying to alert you. You were so into it.
I can only see like Bruce on my screen. So okay, so using humor. Humor alleviates stress and helps to reframe situations as more of a challenge than a threat. So, you know, I love humor. Celebrating successes and knowing this is the diatribe I was going on, Katie, where I looked probably really into it. Knowing the folks that we're working with well enough to know how they like to be celebrated. So the example that I was offering to myself was that if it's something that involves a group, I don't like to be praised in front of a group, and so I would much rather have that celebration happen in a one-on-one situation. So when at all possible, kind of using that, knowing that about the folks that we're working with, to know what kind of celebration makes the most sense for them. Maybe they are somebody who needs to be celebrated publicly and in a really big way. Maybe they are somebody that, you know, you want to try to call the newspaper and share their story of recovery, right? Knowing folks what they need and when they need it, those successes. But most of the time we need to kind of feel ridiculous about how excited we are about the success that they're having. Hope Network, so good. Going to say it twice. Really, who are the folks that when I experience you know, some sort of barrier and I start to kind of dip into that phase of rage, who do I call in that moment? How do I get in touch with them? What are the strategies? Who do I need to help me really work on my agency, my motivation? Is that the same person as I might need to help me work on my pathways, right? On that sort of more analytical, strategic thinking, and knowing who to call for what, when, and how. Why and how. Providing surrogate hope. So as professionals, we can provide surrogate hope for the folks that we work with. And this is really the idea that people report that we believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. So finding ways to communicate that to them, particularly for people who are in early stages of recovery, where, you know, their hope may really be fluctuating greatly at that time. And then stories of success of peers is in the literature something that is cited a lot as being the specific thing that really ignited hope for folks, that it was somebody who had a similar experience. And so then I felt like if they could do it, I could do it too. So what's fascinating to me is as I was doing my prep for our time together today, most of the people, I think it was about 60% of people with a severe mental illness achieve recovery or are in recovery. That I wasn't able to find like a specific number of people. I know in the substance use field, we have more than 23 million Americans that are in recovery, but I wasn't able to find a similar statistic for the mental health world. If anybody knows what that number is, I would love to know it. Because I think that also speaks to it. Even if they just hear one story, right? Knowing that there are a whole bunch of other people and how they might get connected to some of those other stories, right? Stories in movies, stories from books, depending again upon the person, is another way to let them experience those stories. Super, super powerful. I think it can be powerful for family members too, right? Because we also, I'm the loved one of someone in recovery from substance use disorder, and I'm also the loved one of someone in recovery from severe mental illness. And I think that we as loved ones also have our own recovery process to go through in order to be the best support, to be part of that hope network for folks. So whenever appropriate, depending upon your role, that's an opportunity too, because I'll tell you a little bit more about why here in another slide or two. And then, of course, lots of good evidence to support the role of peer support professionals in nurturing and maintaining hope to help folks maintain recovery. So I wanted to offer kind of just some, right, to connect all the dots and to really kind of make it like real world practical as possible. What does this sound like when we talk with the folks that we're working with? Some of these might be things that we ask when we're first getting to know somebody new that we're working with. Tell me what you're good at, right? What are you good at? And if they have a hard time identifying what those are, that they probably have lower hope, right? What have you succeeded in? Again, if they're not able to identify it and you have some sort of history about them, maybe you're able to point some things out, and immediately then you're able to start building that hope. What are they proud of? What are their accomplishments? And in the context of sort of symptom management, what do you already know how to do that helps? Right? If it's somebody who's been in treatment before, I would like to think that they would be able to answer that question. Otherwise, our treatment system is even worse than I think it is. I found this super groovy study from Australia that surveyed people in recovery, including peer support workers, and it asked them to identify interactions or experiences that they had that they could really identify as igniting or maintaining their hope. And these were the 8 things that group of folks reported. And I know they're Australian, but I thought it still applied. So really knowing that I am loved or cared about, okay? And that might be by my family. It might not be by my family. It might be by a friend group that I identify. It might be feeling that way, knowing that if I'm working with a peer support provider, it might be knowing that that peer support provider cares about me, okay? So just knowing that I am loved or cared about. That might be another kind of professional relationship, right? Where someone is able to appropriately express their care and concern for the person that they're working with. Feeling supported, and this can be supported by people or by services, knowing that particular services can be there for me and I can rely on them was something that folks cited in addition to just people. Knowing others believe in my ability to recover. So folks talked about how this whole idea that feeling supported didn't necessarily mean that people believed I could recover. They kind of talked mostly about that experience with family members, that they felt family supported them, but didn't necessarily feel that their family members always believed that they could recover. And so in those instances, they remarked on how hearing that from professionals that they could recover was really important to them. In terms of feeling respected, listened to, and believed, this was in the context primarily of healthcare workers and folks feeling as though they were being treated with dignity and respect, and that they had some choice in their course of treatment. Of course, right, witnessing and hearing stories of recovery, no surprise there, and I've harped on that probably enough today. Learning helpful strategies and information. So receiving tools to get well, coping skills were of course cited as a very common thing that folks brought up in that regard. And then this idea of connecting and belonging, knowing that I'm not alone, that there are other people who have similar experiences to me, and that, you know, I fit in, right? We all want that. We all want to belong. And then being able to contribute to or help others. So being needed by somebody and being able to help them. So supporting other people in their recovery process was something that was specifically mentioned there. So I think this is probably all stuff that in the context of our day-to-day work with folks, we do a lot of this. But I think it's a nice reminder to know that the impact that those actions have, particularly, you know, when the days are long and, you know, it's hard. It's hard work. So this is a graphic that comes from Arizona State University and their Center for the Advanced Study and Practice of Hope. And I just offer this as a resource for you, particularly if you are sort of a visual person who needs those visual cues. I offer this as something to share with the folks that you work with, as a way to kind of share this science, if that's appropriate, or however you think you might need to use it. I just really liked how it really lays out the whole sort of process in one kind of super groovy visual aid. So that's a resource for you. And then one last thing before we get to questions. Hope is one of the best predictors of overall well-being. And so in my mind, that is one very good reason to really try to nurture it in the folks that we work with. It requires action. It can be nurtured over time, even when it feels like we have some very, you know, difficult folks that we work with and we're never going to quite get them there. We have to have hope. We have to have that belief that their future can be better and that we can make that so. And that hope is for everyone. All right. What questions do you have?
On team.
I just
So,
want to say I really like your cat.
thank you. I'm really annoyed with him at the moment, so I'm glad you're enjoying him. Do you find that you're doing this already in your work, that you're doing these things already? So you are Hope Warriors. Did you know it? Did you know that you were a Hope Warrior? Dawn didn't know.
I don't know if anyone else was going to unmute and talk, but like speaking for myself, this wasn't necessarily like a new concept, but it was reframed for me in like how important what we do fosters hope. And just the importance of that and just some other little takeaways on like how do we kind of refocus to get back on the path of hope and increasing hope.
I know some of the handouts you sent over, I'm gonna actually use them for group.
Oh, sweet. Which one spoke to you the most?
Well, hold on.
Uh-oh, pop quiz.
I gotta find it. I see I exited out of it now because I printed it.
Ah, okay.
But I mean, I was gonna show the whole, which one was it? As a visual, I was gonna show that little like path of the hope. And then there was two where the way you can actually fill in, like the worksheets you can fill in.
Mhm.
I was gonna go through that.
Sweet. Sweet. Yeah, one really walks through the process of hope, has folks like visualize what is success going to look like for you? What's that going to mean for the people in your life? What's the impact going to be? And you know, kind of imagination and visualization are two other sort of strong skills or ways to really reinforce that hope. It's just fascinating to me, really fascinating. And this is a cat. Other thoughts?
Because I thought it was, and I apologize, I have a really bad cold and barely a voice, but I just thought it was for our guys, we talk about it a lot, that it's sometimes just those little things, those baby steps, like taking a shower today. We have that in our treatment plans, like to just take a shower 2 times a week or things like that. So, and just celebrating those little things, even, you know, even as adults. So those little steps are really important sometimes to give them hope.
Absolutely. 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 It took you 5 fewer prompts to take your shower. Yes. Right?
Positive.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Totally. Folks get excited about that, right? We all want to be appreciated for that, because that's effort. That's real effort. And that should be acknowledged. And I wish you feel better, Janine.
Thank you. Me too.
You've prompted me, Chris, to pay attention to my hope and wish language. So I'm going to be doing that also.
Yeah. Did anybody else pick up on my wish for Janine rather than my hope?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
It's
you say it all the time. Yeah. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have this and that. But yeah, to think about that.
yeah, it's something to wrap your mind around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Other things that I did not include that you wish you would have had that I could maybe find for you? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Well, Jenna, I wish you lots of luck with the worksheets in group. And I would love to hear how that goes.
So thanks so much,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. It was good.
Thank you.
Good info.
Thanks for your time.
Thank
And
you.
can I overstep? And of course, I see your email on the screen. If we would need anything or have any questions, could we reach out to you about whatever?
Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
I don't have all the answers, but I know who to ask. Usually.
That's great. Don't we all?
Yeah.
And I have a cat who wanted to be part of training today. So
He's now wiser than he was
Yes.
before.
He has a lot of hope right now.
he does. Well, his strategy paid off. His pathway paid off. He knew that if he sat there long enough that he would eventually get what he wanted. That was his goal.
That's fabulous.
Well, thanks for your time, folks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Wish you well.
Ah, yes.
Good job, Dawn.
Yes. Good
There you
job.
go, Dawn.